A man who originally walked away from football with his head held high, his health intact, and with an outlook on life that had all the perspective of a poet.
It is a rare day in the NFL when a head coach leaves the game behind uttering words of prose worthy of a Robert Frost poem. But then, Bud Grant's sense of achievement always differed vastly from the often hectic waters of pro football's mainstream.
If you look at all the other coaches, the Paul Browns, the Eubanks, all the great ones have almost all been fired. Now, I don't think Tom Landry's going to get fired. I'm sure Don Shula's not going to get fired, and I don't see Chuck Noll getting fired. But all the great ones have moved or been fired. We've been able to pick where we wanted to live. And we're living and coaching exactly where I wanted to be. I was doing exactly what I wanted in exactly the place I wanted to do it. And I think that's an accomplishment in itself, just to be able to raise a family in one location.
Bud Grant's values were always sharply focused, and they were reflected by a Viking team that was the mirror image of his self-control and discipline. For in his mind, teamwork began with a daily practice of standing at attention for the national anthem, while winning evolved when restless emotion was spared from the sideline and saved for the field. The result was football's most ingenious group of overachievers, a team that gained lasting NFL infamy for frightening kickers, forcing turnovers, and finding ways into the end zone that could never have been diagrammed on a blackboard. The Vikings' sense of opportunism had no bounds, for even when the harsh reality of Minnesota's early winter came to cast a chilling spell of dismay over opponents, the Vikings went right on breathing their cool air of confidence, a testimony to the Svengali-like powers of their Sphinx-like coach.
He said, you're only out there for 2 hours. You're not going to get sick. You're not going to catch a cold. You catch a cold from germs, not from cold weather. So he believed it. We made us believe it. So pretty quick, we were all believing that cold weather really didn't affect us. But, later on, now that, and I still live here, and it does get cold in Minnesota. And when it is very cold, I go outside, and I always think of Bud saying, cold weather doesn't hurt you. It's not going to bother you.
Being cold is something that is akin to being hot. I mean, you're uncomfortable, but you can function up to a certain point. I think I knew what that point was. I tried to convince the players of that, to the extent that some of them bought it for Bill Brown or Mick Tingelhoff would just, we'd get out there and the wind chill would be 20 below or 30 below, and they'd roll their sleeves up, wouldn't wear a warm-up jacket, and go out, and the other team would, you could see them, they were looking at it and say, those guys are crazy.
Neither rain, nor sleet, nor swirling snow could ever keep Bud Grant's men from delivering their own fire and brimstone on the playing field. What glory they gained in the Minnesota snow faded into the shadows of the Super Bowl sun. Ironically, what stood as the only pinnacle of coaching success never scaled by Bud Grant also defined his resilient capacity for coming back. 4 times he rebounded from major defeats that might have crushed the competitive spirits of lesser men.
Chuck Foreman on a plane once conducted a private poll. He proposed a scenario. You were thrust into a jungle, 100 crocodiles, agonizing experience, only one chance in a million to get you out alive. Who would get you out? And he took a poll, and the unanimous selection of all the players was H.P. Bud Grant. He could get you out of there before anybody could because he knew how to survive. He had some kind of formula.
Bud Grant's formula for success and survival has been his simple precept that before a man presumes to influence the measures that control the lives of others, he must control himself. Unfortunately, in the public eye, this gave Bud Grant the personality of a man who mistakenly got off in Minnesota on his way to Mount Rushmore, where he had a date to be carved in granite.
There are many different sides to Bud Grant, and I think the public only had an opportunity to see one, and that was the stone-faced coach standing on the sidelines, and nothing seemed to affect him. You know, no emotion. You know, but he was a very emotion-filled human being.
I don't deny that he sometimes looks like he's a little cold out there, but as far as his look, some people called him Stone-Face and other things, you know, and the Great Ghost. And, well, I knew Bud pretty well, and I could talk to him anytime, and I didn't have any problem. We kid back and forth, and he's probably the biggest practical joker I've ever seen.
Guys would go fishing, and he'd take one of the fish and kind of stick it down in one of the places in their car that wouldn't be noticed for several weeks. You can imagine what that would do.
I said today that I even saw some history made. I saw Bud Grant smile real big, and I think that's a good sign.
In true pioneer spirit, this local folk hero's rugged individualism ranked him #1 in the hearts of his neighbors of the Great North, where he was never afraid to laugh at an image that was, in some ways, a media creation. Parody, though, was but a small side of this multi-dimensional man. He was a humorist and naturalist who was very much at home in the great outdoors. And he was a versatile athlete who performed for 2 seasons with the NBA champion Minneapolis Lakers before starring with the Philadelphia Eagles as the NFL's second leading receiver in 1952. Yet, for all the competitive zeal that spurred Bud Grant on to win success as a player and a coach, he never lost sight of the fact that football was merely his means to justify a more important end.
Football was my job. Sports have been my life. I've been involved in sports all of my life. And this was the thing that I could do best to make a comfortable home and family atmosphere. You've got 6 children, you come from absolute zero. Your main commitment in life is to take care of your family and to provide them possibly with the things that you didn't have. And you get satisfaction. I get more satisfaction out of providing for my family than I ever did coaching a football game.
Bud would teach football, coach football, and be there at the sideline and be a very good coach on the sideline. But when it was over, that was the ball game. He went home to his family. And on the odd day would go into the duck blind. And the player, understanding from his coaching at college and high school, where they made life and death out of this thing, would look at this guy and say, hey, maybe he knows something more than I do. Maybe he knows something more than the other guys knew. He must know because he keeps winning.
Bud Grant's ability to win spanned both changes in his personnel and in the cultural mores of our time. But to the players that he always treated as men, he left a legacy that speaks far less about football and more about pride, leadership, and understanding of human nature. These were the essential values of Bud Grant that will be remembered long after his many wins and few losses are forgotten.
The most important thing any coach has with his athletes is credibility. He has that. I have never known him to embarrass a player publicly for a mistake or even for bad play. I've known him to fire a player for that, but not to cost him his dignity. And the players respect that.
If you couldn't play for Bud Grant, you couldn't play at all. He is the greatest leader of men that I've ever worked with. He taught me more about life than anybody that I've ever been with maybe the exception of my father. He has more common sense than anybody that I've ever worked with. Amazing human being, and one that the relationship I had with him I cherish very much.
I always felt that in order to lead people or to set an example, that you had to provide incentive for them, give them initiative, and let them get the credit for their success as much as you can. There's a quote that I had clipped many, many years ago, and this was a quote by an old Chinese prophet and goes way back to 585 BC. Exactly, it stated that a leader is best when people barely know he exists Not so good when people obey and acclaim him. Worse when they despise him. But of a good leader who talks little when this work is done, his aim fulfilled, they will say, we did it ourselves.
In 1934, the undefeated Chicago Bears met the New York Giants in the NFL's second championship game.